truth is, I did not want to make this video. I did not want to make this video serious, but I've been teasing it for 2 months now, and today, well, we've got the 9th of June. It's been long enough. It's been long enough. I've teased it long enough. Let's talk about it. The 10 players that can replace Lewandowski. Now, as I said initially, it's going to be more than 10 players. But I'm going to call it the top 10 players, or 10 players who can do it. I'm going to run it into a series. We're going to run it to the ground, quite frankly, because a lot of people will be sick and tired, probably, by the 3rd video. Why? Well, we'll get to that when the 3rd or 4th video will be out. But we need to lay some ground rules. Now, first of all, I do want to say this, and this is very important. It's imperative that I start with this. This video is a disclaimer. That's all this video is. It's a disclaimer. It's setting the ground rules for what's to come over the next couple of weeks. But this disclaimer also has a disclaimer. Hilarious, I know. But that disclaimer is very, very simple. I don't dislike Lewandowski. I never have. And I never will. I've never rated him as highly. People probably are thinking, well, you've always disliked him. I've never disliked him. I've just never liked him. There's a difference. I've always been indifferent towards him, which is why right now, with the whole drama going on, quote unquote drama going on, a lot of people that liked him now feel betrayed. They now dislike him. Whereas I've always just been Right now I'm like Right now, basically, what we're seeing from him is the reason why I've never liked him in the first place. Because it's always been there. It's always been apparent. I don't know why people are suddenly shocked or surprised, I guess. But that's the disclaimer. I've never disliked Lewandowski. I don't dislike Lewandowski now. This isn't a Lewandowski bashing series, per se. This is a players who I think we should get. Now, in my opinion, we should have sold Lewandowski last year or maybe 2 years ago, in all fairness. But even then, I thought, when I initially made this series, quote unquote, Lewandowski wasn't really rumored to be leaving. So I kind of wanted him to be sold this summer. Now, with what you've been saying, I do want us to keep him as an example, but that has less to do with Lewandowski and that has more to do with just the club. The club actually having some respect for themselves, That's kind of what I'm after right now. So I don't think we should sell Lewandowski this season, honestly. Keep him. Forced to keep him, I guess, at this point, unfortunately, even though I would have loved to have sold him. But things have changed now. It sometimes just happens to be like that. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, here are the rules. Number 1. The player needs to make sense economically, financially. That's what needs to happen. It needs to make sense from a financial and economic standpoint. We can't just buy, I'll give an example. We can't just go out and buy a Lukaku who will cost close to 100 million in transfer fees and then will cost 20 million a year in wages. Our wage structure is a mess. It has been a mess for the longest. A lot of smarter people than me, and a lot of people that have taken a lot more time have looked into it and have decided and been able to educate a lot of people on the internet, whether that's through blogs, whether that's through Twitter, whether that's through microblogs, whether that's through videos, whether that's through many ways. People have educated that are much smarter than me and much more financially versed than me. But our wage structure has been effed for years. And the goal isn't to continue that path. The goal is to get Bayern out of that path and launch it to a future trajectory. And that's what we're doing with a striker. One, has to make economic sense, financial sense. 2, the player has to fit. Now, I don't think that's much of a disclaimer, quote unquote, because a lot of people. No, actually, you know what? It is a disclaimer. The player has to fit. He has to be perfect in terms of ability for Bayern. And here's my distinction between most people's distinction when it comes to ability, right? Ability doesn't mean they're going to score 40 goals a season. We could get players like that. There will be players on this list that I reckon could get 40 goals a season. I could replace Lewandowski and just come in and score 40 goals a season. I definitely do think there are players on my list that could do that. But we're not here just for that. We're not here to look at the XG. I've never liked stats like that personally, but stats are stats, and they all help with a picture. What we're here today, not today, but what we're here with is players that make sense in terms of their ability, even outside of their striking ability. And it will make a lot more sense once I start the series. You'll see a lot of names that you might not consider, but that I think makes sense for one reason or another, because they've got one aspect of the game that will help us. For example, I can give you an example. A player that makes a lot of runs. A player that has a short memory. A player that is eager to get in certain positions, whether that's the half spaces, the full spaces, or whether that's central. You know, there are different qualities that we can seek based on the players that we have around, players that are currently part of the squad. So it doesn't have to be someone that is, that gets the ball and scores 10 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10. That's obviously important, but it's not that important. It's just one aspect of a whole broader, wider picture, and we'll talk about those and the more specific canvases and the more specific painting color choices and the more specific mixtures that we can have, the tertiary colors, the secondary colors, and obviously the primary colors, and we'll talk about those in a lot more detail when the game and when the series actually starts. Number 3, and this one is the least tangible element of all, he has to have the right mentality. And I kind of alluded to it when I said a player having a short memory. I kind of alluded to that. But there is also a distinction between having a short memory and just being like, okay, you know what, I effed up here, let's move on, let me just continue, let me just try again, and so on and so forth. And if I try again, and it doesn't work, I try again because I've got a short memory, I forgot all my mistakes, I forgot all my errors, so on and so forth, let's move on. That's nice, but we need that mentality. Because there are some players, and I won't mention any names, but there are some players that, let's just say, when the stars are brightest, when the moments are the most tense, quite frankly, when the limelight is on them, they cave. They don't perform. They perform rarely compared to, the average game. And I'm not naming any players, all right? I'm not naming any players. But there are some players that live off of a legacy from 2012 and haven't since then created a new legacy in these big moments, these important, vital clashes. And quite frankly, what I'm here for is mentality. Not so much a mentality to, oh, I need to score. Oh, I need to perform. Oh, I need to do well. No. It's what can I do that will help the team win this? What can I do, even if I have to sacrifice scoring myself, what can I do that will enable us to get this victory, to move on, and then, quite frankly, to win the bigger trophies? That's what I'm after. That right there is what I am after. So that's the mentality aspect. And of course, as I said, it's the least tangible aspect because, quite frankly, how do you define that? How do you find that? You could always look at historical data like, oh, this player has been in 12 big clashes and they've only scored once. Haha. But then again, I give you a counter argument. Maradona won the World Cup in 1986. Didn't win it in 1990. And guess why? Lothar Matthäus. Now, some of you that are younger than me or even older than me, you have no recollection, you don't care about that. Well, okay, I'll explain why I'm saying that. Maradona was always known as a big-time player. When the stars were the brightest, when the limelight was on him, he shined the brightest. Now, unfortunately, when he came up against Lothar Matthäus, oftentimes he didn't shine at all, even in the biggest clashes with Napoli versus Inter. He didn't shine because Lothar Matthäus stopped him. He was known as like the Maradona killer, essentially. Maradona at one point called him his toughest rivals of all time. I believe in 8 games that those two had against each other, Maradona only scored once. For a player of Maradona's qualities, and especially in the biggest moments of them all, 2 World Cup finals, Maradona, multiple clashes, at the top of the table in Serie A, Maradona only scored once against Lothar Matthäus. Now, would you say Maradona's not a big game player? Absolutely not. So why did he only score once in the most vital clashes? Because sometimes you just come up against opponents, where that isn't possible, where that isn't so easy. So that's why I'm saying it's difficult to quantify someone being clutch, someone showing up in the biggest moments. And it's why that will be the least important aspect, but also simultaneously the most important aspect. Because it's one aspect that you can't just say, aha, I'm looking at the stats, it worked here, 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 here. It didn't work here, but overall, since it worked here, 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 it's 4 out of 5. You are now clutch. That's not how it works. But also, we have to look at those 4 times and then decide, why did it work here? Why did it not work there? Is there a reason? It's things like that we have to look at. It's why this series is going to take a lot of effort from me. Because I got my list. I've had my list even before all of this was rumored. I've had my list this entire season now. That's not the issue. And as I said, I'm expanding that list, but I'm still going to call it top 10. I'll just throw like some extra, quote unquote, extra videos in between, right? Because top 10, everyone likes top 10s for some reason, right? And it's going to be a multi-week long series, right? But my job is to convince you. In my opinion, I'm convinced already. I've seen these players play multiple times, but I'm going to name players that you might have never even heard of before. We're throwing players from the MLS in. We're throwing players from the Belgium League. We're throwing players from youth leagues. We're throwing players from, you've got the Eredivisie. I always like saying that name, to be fair. The Eredivisie. We're throwing players in from France. We're throwing players in from anywhere and everywhere. Everything is good. So it's going to be quite interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. But it's going to be my job to try and convince you. And that's why I didn't want to make this series. Because I know exactly what I'm going to get. If I'm going to name off some no-name kid that no one's ever heard of before, that people are going to be like, who's this? Who's this? He's not even ranked on Football Manager. Why are you bringing up this kid? And it's going to be difficult. And it's going to take effort. And I don't like effort. Which is why I didn't want to make this series. In all honesty. That's why I didn't want to make this series. But we must venture forward. Otherwise, we just become stagnant and die and perish. So let's do it. Let's do it. Those are my disclaimers for the series. I'll hope to see you all in the next one. And I hope you all join me in this series. With that said, I'll see you all next time.